Okay, morning all. It's Alan again. We've got our 15 questions and it's with Keri and Payne this time. I was fortunate enough to swim with Keri Ann. I think the first time I swam with her was in about 2007 at the Worlds, or a lead up to the Worlds in Melbourne. And it was quite an experience having new members of the team, because it was normally just me floating around on my own. So it was pretty cool. And from that point to the end of Keri Ann's swimming, really, she drove the sport forwards in a massive way, and coming away with an Olympic silver medalist. She was a world champion, and really has continued with that work and that work ethic that she's had in swimming into the formation of straight line swimming and Triscape as businesses. So hello, Keri Ann.
Hi, Alan. I wasn't sure exactly what you were going to say then when you said it was quite an experience. That's why I laughed.
It's because I remember that we went out on a boat and they dropped us in the middle of the sea, and I let you and Cassie go in front because I knew there were jellyfish. So you two got stung and moved all the jellyfish out of the way. That's
Yeah.
Okay, so we put out a load of questions just to see what our members at Titans can come up with, and I'll ring them off for you. So the first one is: did you get nervous before racing, and was it more so before the Olympics?
Very good question. And this is a really interesting one because I kind of changed a little bit as I went throughout my career. So I was always nervous. I was nervous for the school swimming gala. Even though I had qualified for the Olympic Games and I still had to go and race for my school, I was still nervous before doing the school swimming gala, even though I knew that there was absolutely no way anybody was going to beat me on any of the races I was doing. I was still nervous. And when I was younger, it was kind of exciting and I was nervous and it was, oh, this is fun. But then when I got a bit older and the pressure started mounting on me a little bit more, and there was expectation. So I'd gone from Olympic silver medal to world champion the next year, 2009. And then 2010 was the next world championships after that. And I really felt a bit of the pressure on that one. And kind of leading up to that whole year, it was in a venue that was a strange and weird venue out in Roberval in Canada. And we can talk about those stories another time if you want, but it was a very weird, strange experience. And I kept getting these stomach aches. I didn't really understand what it was. And it was a combination of essentially, I was thinking, right, I am world champion. I should not be nervous for this. This is not something, I know what I'm doing. I've trained, I've done everything I needed to do. Why am I still feeling a bit like this? And yeah, it was I had a terrible race, absolutely terrible. I can't put my finger on what didn't go well. I trained really well. My racing was at the time really, really good. And I had all the skills I thought I needed, but for whatever reason it didn't go very well. It was freezing cold, but that shouldn't have been a big factor in that anyway. And then we were doing the 5K a couple of days later, and I had such a bad stomach ache. I had to pull out of the swim. I couldn't do it. And I just could not figure out what it was. And at the time we had a psychologist with us, and he helped me kind of really figure out what was going through my head, which essentially was I was trying to stop the nerves. I was trying to go, I don't need to be nervous. My body does not need to be nervous. I know exactly what I'm doing. I've done this hundreds of times before. I should have this. Everyone's expecting me to do this, so I should be able to do it. So why am I nervous? And I basically tried to subside it. I tried to stop the nerves from happening. And what it turned out was my body basically reacted really badly to that. So the biggest lesson I learned throughout my whole career was that nerves are actually a really, really good thing. Your body needs them. You need to get your body ready and excited to race. And that's what the nerves are. So once I let them flood through me, for the next year, which was the next World Championship 2011, I ended up having the absolute race of my life that year, and I won the World Championships again. And the things that were different was that I let it happen and I was excited, and I used those nerves to help me rather than kind of keep those nerves down. Don't be nervous. Don't need to be nervous. So yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing I learned, was that nerves are a really good thing.
Cool, great insight. And probably another point when you weren't nervous but more than excited is how did you feel standing on the podium to collect that Olympic silver medal?
I really wish I could remember back to that. I do remember just being emotional. I do remember like wanting to cry because the whole of that, our swimming team were there. They'd come to watch us, which was really nice. Most of them were a little bit hungover because the open water is usually after the swim, but they were all there to watch us and down the last straight. It was in the rowing lake, so it was quite close for where we were to where the bank was and where all the swimmers were. And the last lap they ran up and they were running up and down the side. And my husband now, but at the time my boyfriend David was part of the team as well. And I could see him waving, going, go, 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 go. And to have them there and to see them kind of, cheering us along up to the finish and then finishing and going, what just happened? Like, there's definitely only one person that passed me. That means that I came second. Oh my goodness. Because that was the first race I'd ever really won a medal in open water. So I was fairly new at that time to open water swimming, and that was the first one that I actually won a medal at, which was the Olympic Games. So it wasn't just that it was in the Olympics, it was one of the first ones in open water that I actually succeeded really well in. So it was kind of a combination of, oh, I just did that, that's so weird, and then we ran to go and see our teammates, and Cassie, my teammate, and in the race at the same time, she came third, so she was crying, and then I was kind of crying. But the funny thing was that we were both so dehydrated because we'd raced this 10k and it was a really warm day that we didn't actually have much fluid in our system, so we were dry. We were like but nothing was coming down. It looked like we were totally faking it. But it was a very emotional experience. Our coach was there as well, and he just got two people winning an Olympic silver and an Olympic bronze medal. All of our teammate was there. David was there. He did tell me they had a bit of sun cream in his eye. That's why his eyes were watering a little bit. And it was just amazing to see them all there and have them all there. So it was a very emotional experience. But I do kind of wish I'd stood for a second and just took in and remembered the moment of standing on the podium. But it was just so surreal.
Very cool. If you weren't a swimmer and you had another sport that you thought you could have a pop at, what would that have been?
Honestly, I only ever would have been a swimmer. I was no good at many things. I tried everything. My mom made us try everything as kids. We tried cross country, I tried high jump, I tried shot put, I tried javelin, we tried cross country running, hockey. We literally tried absolutely everything, dancing, all of it. And swimming was the one thing that I kept coming back to, the one thing that I loved. And when I was younger, it wasn't a case of I want to go to the Olympic Games to do this. It was, how can I make sure that I can carry on swimming forever? So even if I hadn't gone to the Olympic Games, I still think I would have swam. So there is absolutely no other sport that I would have done. Literally swimming is it.
Excellent. How do you pace yourself in open water?
It kind of depends a bit on the race. It depends on the field as well, who you've got there and what the race is. So if it's an Olympic Games, it's there's lots at stake, and there's lots of cat and mouse with that. And because you've got a big field of people, you tend not to. I tended not to just go out for it, because I don't know if anybody watched the Rio. The men's 10k in Rio, but there was an Australian swimmer that did that. He just absolutely went out from the start, and he probably got maybe 400 meters ahead of everybody, and everyone was like, oh, this guy's done it, he's going to win, he's going to absolutely win, he's going to no one's seen him go. But everybody that was in the world of open water swimming knew that absolutely wasn't the case. You can't really do that. You can't just sprint from the front and then hope to do that. And he literally got maybe 200 meters from the end, or maybe 400 meters from the end, and then I think he came 25th in the end, or maybe 23rd out of 25 swimmers for that 10k. But that was what he thought was his best opportunity. But really, swimming with the pack is or swimming with the lead pack is where you pitch what you're doing. Doesn't really give you much of an answer, other than you kind of just have to be aware of who's in the field, know what their tactics usually can be and what they are, and then you essentially just play it, like I said, play a little bit of cat and mouse. You make sure that you're in the position you want to be in. So for me, it was favouring the positions I wanted to be in, which was for the first part of my career, it was in the front, but for the second half of my career, really, it was about being in the top 3, top 4, making sure I was close enough to the front to know if somebody had gone off, but and if things needed to change, I could change it, but it wasn't too too far back in the pack, which is easier because you've got more people in front of you, so you can generally swim a little bit slower. But it was just too much of a risk for me. So pacing yourself, you just know that down the last 1,500, 2,000 meters, it's just going to be an absolute sprint as fast as you possibly can be. But you have to save one extra little bit of energy for the end, the last 100 meters, and just hope that your skills are good enough to get you there, like sighting and making sure you can swim in a straight line and all that kind of stuff. But the first part of it can sometimes be quite slow, actually, because, like I said, everyone's just finding the position that they want to be in. Someone eventually picks the lead and someone will go out in front. And depending on who that is as well, whether they're going to go fast, whether they're going to go slow. So it's not really like you can say a specific pace. It's very much dependent on the field that you're in and the race that you're doing, for me anyway.
Yeah, I quite often liken it to playing chess, and that you're always looking 3 places in front of where, or 3 moves in front of where you are, and then really the last 1,000 meters is you're not playing chess anymore. You're throwing the board out the window and going for it. So it's really
absolutely
good. And how do you prepare before your races?
Before the races, again, I went through quite a big journey for three Olympic Games and figuring out what were the best things. Beijing for me was, at the time, I thought it could be the only Olympic Games I was ever going to make. So for me, it was about, just getting the training in, making sure I did as much training as possible, training as hard as I could, as fast as I could, for as long as I could. Not anything near what you used to train, to be fair, but my version of training as far as I could. And yeah, just the preparation was, a bit of land stuff beforehand. We would get in and we would do a warm-up beforehand as well, and then get out, get changed, get ready, do some more land kind of warm-up. But then as more and more people got involved in open water swimming, and more what's the word I'm trying to look for, but more people were thinking about open water swimming, because we had won some medals and there was an opportunity to win more medals at home Olympic Games. So more and more people started getting involved and getting on board in what we were trying to do. And that's, so kind of pre-London, things were a little bit all over the place in terms of coaching. So my coach had become ill. I was trying to figure out, and I had a kidney infection as well just beforehand. I had a lower back issue, which was the January before the Olympic Games. So there was quite a lot of little nitty things that I don't feel were really ironed out very well in the preparation leading up to London. But then what we realized after that was that open water swimming is not like pool swimming. You can't just turn up 2 hours before, do a warm up, go into the stands, have some food, do a little bit of foam rolling. Then you can maybe do a second warm up if you do that, and then get into your suit, which is basically a warm up trying to get into your suit, or they were back then when they were the long suits anyway. And then, then you do a little bit of land warm up, and then you get going. It is quite different. We're there 2.5 hours before races. I never, for the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I didn't do any warm up in the water, which might sound weird considering I was doing a 10K. But it just wasn't worth either lowering your body temperature or getting in there. But there was other things that were more important. So we came up with a land routine that was a really robust one. It was made to, first of all, loosen everything off, and then making sure that our heart rate was raised. So there was a small little 2-minute routine that we used to do, and I used to do that sort of every 5 minutes. I used to do the routine sort of for the last sort of maybe 20 minutes before I went into my actual swim, and then just before we went in again, I would do it. And the whole point of that routine was to raise my heart rate, raise my core temperature, to get me ready. And it was a full body move that basically everything was ready and firing and good to go. And then more emphasis was put on the nutrition that we did beforehand, making sure that we carb loaded and it was the right kind of carb loading, making sure that we were sodium loading as well on top of that. So because we were swimming for 2 hours, we didn't want to have to stop if we didn't need to for fluids, essentially. So if we were if we could do all of that beforehand, then we would try and do that essentially. So preparation beforehand was very much a mental game, because you'd have to go into the first call room, which was where showed your accreditation. They signed up your names, they checked your nails, made sure they weren't too long, checked you didn't have any jewelry on, they checked your suit, they checked your goggles, and they checked your hat to make sure that they're all FINA stamped, FINA approved, things that you were going to be wearing. Then you had to go and get little tattoos. The most annoying part, I don't know about you, Alan, but the most annoying part for me about open water swimming was getting tattoos before we swam. And it wasn't just one tattoo, it was tattoos on the arm, tattoos on the hand, tattoos on the other hand, tattoos on the other arm, tattoos on the shoulder, and then more tattoos on the shoulder. and it just took so long. So when you're trying to do all your other preparation, you've got to stand in this queue and have someone put a whole bunch of tattoos on you, and then if they do it wrong, they've got to take them off and they've got to put them back on. Just a bit of a nightmare. And then then you can eventually go and get ready and get yourself changed and ready and do the routine that works. It's quite a long process, and then you go into a call room where your coaches can't go, but it's a call room where they tell you all the briefing about the race, and then you go to the final call room, and that's kind of, I'd say, the most nerve-wracking place for me was in that final call room, because there was nobody else around, none of the coaches could be there, no one could really see you, but you're just sat in a room, a bit like a normal swimming call room, I guess, with all of your fiercest competitors, and then you get called up one by one, and then it's the start of a 2-hour swim, essentially.
Keri Ann wasn't worried about the tattoos, it was the suntan that it left afterwards.
Don't tell my secrets.
She used to train outdoors without goggles on, so she didn't get the goggle lines. So
definitely, that's the best. Again, that's some more advice for you there. If you want to train outdoors for the first 3 days, just don't use goggles, and you won't get goggle marks. It's as simple as that.
I don't know whether this question was put together on the basis that they knew this, but Keri Ann won a medal at the Commonwealth Games in the 400 medley. And the next question was, what was your worst stroke and how did you improve it? By just showing how rounded you were as an athlete, not just being world champion in open water, but also pool medalist at a major international.
Yeah, my absolute worst stroke was breaststroke. Definitely breaststroke. I think that I'm not sure there's many long distance freestyle swimmers who have a really good breaststroke. I think it's kind of one or the other. You don't really have a choice. You can't be both. So the breaststroke definitely let me down time and time again. But for the Commonwealth Games, I did work really hard that year on working on my breaststroke, because there wasn't any major open water meets that year, and there was no open water in Delhi, thank goodness. So I was just training for the 400 medley. So trying to improve my breaststroke, trying to learn more about it. And frustratingly, actually, since retiring from swimming, I've been working on swimming strokes and helping other people and coaching other people to do that. And we've just done a whole bunch of research and work on breaststroke. And I really wish I knew then what I know now about breaststroke, because I definitely would have been a much better breaststroker if I'd worked on the things that we've been kind of working on now with that, and trialing them out in the pool and in the water. But yeah, breaststroke was definitely my worst stroke. And even though we had some amazing breaststroke coaches around us, I just couldn't get it for the life of me.
How hard was the transition between your pool swimming experience to your open water, and were you a natural at it?
I would say that I was a natural in terms of my transition from doing 800 freestyles into open water. The very first competition we did was out in Australia, and it was the Australian Nationals, which was also our qualification for the World Championships, which was in the same venue only 4 months afterwards. And it went really well, actually, with my first swim, and I think I might have come maybe third, I think, in that, fourth in that race, which was my very first open water swim, and I was actually really happy with that performance. I'd say the thing I struggled with the most was mentally. You've gone from an 8.5 minute swim for an 800 freestyle to a 2-hour swim in the open water with so many things that I just hadn't considered. So the first swim was in Melbourne, the same venue that we went to the World Championships in. And when we were there in the December for the trials, there was nothing in the water, and it was totally fine. And I was like, this is great. This is the best idea I've ever had. And then we went there in March for the World Championships. There was thousands upon thousands of jellyfish in the water. And that was the first time I'd ever really properly seen a jellyfish, and got stung by a jellyfish. And it was just, what you like. I remember having a conversation with my coach going, are you kidding me? And it was that exact moment that you talked about, where we were taken out into this boat, because Sean knew that there were jellyfish in the water as well, and he knew that if I swam in from the shore, I would have gone out straight away. So basically the only way I was going to get onto the shore was by if you put me in a boat in the middle of the ocean, and I had to swim back. And we jumped in the water. And they're like, come on, Alan. And you're like, yeah, I'll catch up in a minute. Yeah, on you go, catch up in a minute. Essentially jumped in the water, and then all we saw was jellyfish everywhere. So screamed, like sprint in the opposite direction. Saw another one, screamed, sprint in the opposite direction. And it's the closest I've ever come to having like a proper panic attack in the water. And I was like, no, get me out. I can't do this, get me out of the water. And I almost didn't swim the World Championships. And I remember standing on the podium, on the platform, sorry, before we dived in, then a couple of days later, and all the girls, there was like 60 girls just lined up on this thing going, really, like, we can see them, there's thousands, we have to dive into all of these things, like, we know that they're all there, just looking across going, oh, come on, like, if we all just said no, we don't have to do it. And then as soon as they went, right, you've got 30 seconds to go, everyone just changed, including me. We all just changed. We were like, right, in the game. And the buzzer went, and we all just dived straight into all these jellyfish. So our competitive streaks definitely took over in that moment. But if you think about it and you talk it out loud, we had the opportunity to dive in or not dive in, and we chose to dive in. That kind of, for me, was actually the best thing in the end, was having that as my second swim, because nothing ever got as bad as that swim, or not until really late on in my career did I have a worse jellyfish experience. But essentially nothing got as bad as that swim, just being stung by jellyfish for 2 hours just constantly, and they were getting chopped up in all the boats that they were in the course, like the referee's boat, and just because they get chopped up doesn't mean they stop stinging. So all of us had like they were everywhere in our suit, and it was just dreadful. We were almost double the size that we normally are now, because we were stung everywhere, like nettle stings, essentially very similar to that, but they were just everywhere, just constantly for 2 hours. And for me, that was the hardest thing. I refused for a long time to admit that I was an open water swimmer, and I was more of a pool swimmer. I'm still a pool swimmer, but doing a bit of open water. But then when I came back from Beijing with the silver medal, it was kind of set in stone then that I was definitely an open water swimmer.
Favourite open water venue in the UK and abroad?
My favourite open water venue in the UK is Loch Lomond. It's just beautiful. It's like swimming through bottled water. The scenery is stunning. You just know that there's not that many people that use that water, and it's just beautiful. It's cold, but it really is absolutely amazing. The water's clear as anything. The skyline is just amazing. Even if it's like dark and rainy, it's still absolutely amazing. That's definitely my favorite place in the UK to swim. And then around the world, I think I still would say that actually Repulse Bay in Hong Kong was one of my favorite places. It was an amazing city, and like 20 minutes out on a bus, you were in this most amazing beach town, and the water was, fine enough, but I will never forget there was this huge temple on the water which had loads of amazing statues in there and stuff, and it was just a really special swim actually. And that's one of we always had amazing swims there. Was it always the first? I think it was the first in the season, usually the first to the last in the season, so everyone was still kind of just learning what they were doing. So it was a combination of all those things. It was an amazing venue. I really enjoyed going out there, and it was early season, so there wasn't really any pressure, or it wasn't too much pressure. I really enjoyed that.
Very cool. We've got a swimmer, James Raw. He says he trains in Cardigan Bay, and the scariest thing he swum with was a seal. What's the worst and scariest that you've swum with?
I think anything in the water always gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies. I always have a jaws moment whenever I get into the open water. And I think the scaredest, I'm not sure if that's a proper word, but the moment I've been the most scared in my whole life was out in China. So it was a swim. So I was going out. It was my second swim back in the open water after having taken a year out after the London Olympics. The first one was in Italy, which is a lovely swim, and then we were going out to China. After that, and we flew into, I don't know, some random airport in the middle of nowhere, and then we had to get onto a bus for 2 hours inland into China. And all it was dark, couldn't see anything, didn't know where we were going. We turned up, but I was I was the first athlete to arrive, and everybody else wasn't arriving till the next day, same time as I arrived, but the next day. So the next morning we got up, and Bernie was like, our team leader at the time said, you're coming down to go for a swim because you've not swum for 2 days because of the travel that we've had to do. So went down to the venue, and they'd set out this, so it was man-made lake. So they had made this lake. So my brain was going, well, what have they put in there if they're having to make this man-made lake? I have no idea what's in it. There's definitely some sort of monster in there that they've created, and I'm going to have to swim through that. And there's loads of people getting out of the water as I got there, and I was like, why is everyone getting out? And they're like, oh no, this is now the open water training session, so this is just for you guys, aka just for me, because I was the only one there. And Bernie was like, right, just do a lap for me, which was 1,000 meters out from where he was, and then 200 meters across, 1,000 meters back, and then 250 meters across. And I was like, there's absolutely no way, Bernie, that I'm swimming all the way down there on my own with nobody else who knows what's in this water. I'm not doing that. No. And he was like, Keri Ann, you are Olympic silver medalist, double world champion. This is your job. Go in the water and swim one lap. All I'm asking you to do is one lap. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Just sorry, I'm not doing that, Bernie. This is just absolutely not happening. And he was like, what will you do then? So I managed to swim the 50 meters to the big pontoon, and then there was 250 meters across to the next buoy. So I was like, I'll do that bit. And he was like, fine. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize I was bringing a princess along with me. I was like, there's just no way I'm swimming all the way down there by myself. This is not happening. Sorry. I think it's because of you. I'm sure you used to always scare us when we're in the water. So I'm just assuming Alan's going to pop up at some point. Anyway, so I'm swimming across, swimming along, thinking all sorts of thoughts in my head. There was nobody else around. Bernie was too far away to save me if anything did take me under the water. Swimming along. And every now and then I'd probably get like a moment of real panic, and I'd be like, okay, just do some backstroke, just to take a breath in, don't worry about it, then turn back onto my front, carry on. This is my job. What was I thinking? Anyway, and then doing that again, so like 3 or 4 times in that I was like, right, I just need to do some more backstroke again. Anyway, so swimming along. And I swam into something and I screamed so loud because I'd had like an epic moment of something was going to get me. I screamed so loud, and Bernie basically was on the side, heard me, looked over, the lifeguards almost jumped in to come and save me, but I'd turned onto my front and I'd sprinted to get out. And yeah, we looked back and it was just a twig that was in the water, but it scared me so much that I screamed so loud, and I was like, I'm done, Bernie. I don't care how long I've been in, I'm done. I'm not getting back in that water on my own again. So that was probably the moment I've been the most scared in my whole swimming career, which was really ridiculous because it was just a twig.
All those jellyfish are most scared of a twig, like it.
Yeah, pretty much.
How did growing up in South Africa shape your swimming?
Good question. I think it was a no-brainer growing up in South Africa that I was going to be a swimmer. We, when we went to friends' houses, they had swimming pools, and it was a lot warmer there, so there was just definitely going to be lots of swimming. And it was just really lucky that I loved it, essentially. But my older brother and older sister both swam as well. And I wonder if it was because we were in South Africa and there was pools in people's gardens that my mom thought, right, they need to learn how to swim so that they're safe. And I think that was what she started with. Essentially, they need to learn how to swim so that they're safe to do that. And then my brother enjoyed it and my sister enjoyed it. And then by the time I came around, I didn't really have a choice. But to be honest, I didn't want a choice because I absolutely loved it. What I do think open water shaped for me specifically was actually my open water swimming. So in South Africa, we used to, every second, third weekend was an open water swim. There was a mile from, one lake to the next lake, or, and it all accumulated essentially into one big competition at the end of in the middle of the season in February, called the Mid-Mile Mile. And that was a really big, and it still is one of the biggest open water swims in the world. But for me, that was a major competition because you had to qualify to go to that one. But I was always a pool swimmer, and I'd always would have classed myself as a pool swimmer. But that was just one of the things that you did. If you were a swimmer, you definitely swam a mile at least once in your lifetime. And without realizing it, I think from a very, very young age, I was already doing open water swimming, and it didn't cross my mind that it was called open water swimming. It was just swimming. It was just what we did. It was just part of what happened. And when I left South Africa, I didn't actually do any open water swimming again until pretty much 2007. So that was about 6 years where we didn't do much open water swimming unless we went out to South Africa on training camps. But what I think it did, what growing up in South Africa did for me, was really help hone those skills. So when I was doing things like sighting and doing things like swimming in a straight line and pack swimming, I was already used to that because it was something I'd been doing from such a young age. So I think that's really what swimming in South Africa did for me more than anything else. It really helped me to do that. And that's what I think we're missing a bit in the UK for our open water swimmers, is that they're not doing some open water swimming from quite a young age, and we're asking them to do it when they're like 18, 19 years old, and it can be quite scary. as you've heard, like twigs can scare anybody, you know, that kind of stuff. But because I had done it from such a young age, it didn't feel like a real stretch to get into the open water in the first place.
Okay, like that. What are the differences in terms of roughly a guide in terms of the training models that they use in South Africa or the UK?
It definitely felt different. It was more based around clubs, so you would, and I know that we are based around clubs quite a lot in the UK, but it was just different. Clubs were run by families more than anything else than like a committee. Schools definitely played a much bigger part in it, so you would swim for a school, or you know, some people would go to specific schools for bursaries and all that kind of stuff to swim specifically, and you swam for that school as a club. So schools definitely had a much bigger role to play in South Africa, or have a bigger role to play in South Africa than necessarily that we do in the UK. But otherwise, essentially, it's very similar. You know, you race for a club, and then you go to the major, you know, the trials or whatever. I'd say the difference in the UK and South Africa is if you know, rules are rules in the UK. If you're top two, you do the qualifying time. Generally, you go. We follow the qualification criteria. In South Africa, lines are a little bit grayer out there, so it can be a little bit more tricky to make teams, and we don't have the support, or they didn't have the support from the government that we do here in the UK. So they don't have things like UK sport and funding. If you want to go to big competitions, usually you have to pay for it yourself, which is really tricky, really hard to have to do, especially if it's your career and it's something that you want to do for the rest of your life. It can be quite an expensive one because you can't often work and train at the same time. So that's probably the biggest difference between the two.
Excellent. How did you perform as an age group swimmer, and when did you start to have kind of a breakthrough into the hierarchy of swimming?
I was always quite a good swimmer from a young age. I was always, you know, in the top two, top three of all the events that I used to do as a young kid. And I think it's because I was basically just trying to, you know, show off to my brother and sister who were older than me and didn't really want anything to do with me because I was the younger sister and I was just annoying to them. But swimming was the only thing that we all really had in common. So as a youngster, I just didn't care at all about who I was racing or what I was racing. I didn't care how old they were, I didn't care what race it was. I just, you know, got in and did my own thing. And then when we moved to the UK, kind of very similar. It was just different. It was just different people, but I didn't know anybody. I didn't know what to expect. All I could do was concentrate on my own performances and just go out and do the best that I could. And I made my very first team the first year I moved to the UK. So I came in the April and I made my first team in the December that year. It was European Juniors, European Tri-Nations, I think it was actually, which was amazing to have made my first team already. So that kind of really helped me get into the swing of things in the UK. And then when it was probably before I started doing open water swimming actually, the pressure just got to me a little bit, and I was looking at the competitors, you know, worrying about what times they were going to do, what happens if I didn't win, what happens if I came last, what if I didn't have a good start, what if I didn't have a good turn, good finishes, and just, yeah, my brain just completely took over for a couple of years. I hated it, didn't enjoy swimming very much at all, and it got to a point where I was almost ready to stop, almost ready to quit. I think it's probably what I would have said about that. And I'm really, really glad that I didn't. I'm glad that we changed events, and that's when I changed to open water swimming to try something new, something a bit different. It was definitely the best decision that we ever made. But and literally, I didn't have any expectations. It was a different event. It was a new event. And yeah, came home from my first Olympic Games only a year after taking it up with a medal in it. That was that moment that I was like, okay, maybe I can make a bit more of this. But yeah, no, I never as a kid did I ever think, oh, I'd love to make an Olympic Games. I never let myself get to that point. It was almost like, you can think about it if you make it, and if you're there standing on the podium, on the pontoon, then you can think about it. But otherwise, just go training, just do what you're doing, enjoy it as much as you can.
That's great. I think as well, I think it's a good point to highlight is that how many senior internationals have gone through that phase of 2 years of not quite knowing, the realization that they may stop the sport, but actually they continue and then they get huge success afterwards. And I think
Yeah.
I can relate. I know exactly where my point was, and I think there's a lot of athletes out there would say that to young athletes as well today. So really good point. Can you tell us an interesting fact about yourself?
Oh, interesting fact. I don't eat apples.
Done. When you retired from swimming, was it hard to adapt to normal life? And do you ever miss swimming?
No and no. That's the easy answers to the question. No, I found it really easy to adapt actually, because I had made the choice that I was going to stop. It wasn't something that happened to me. I was the one that made the choice to stop. I knew before the Rio Olympics that that was going to be my last race, my last Olympic Games, and I'd prepared myself for that, and I'd prepared something to do afterwards. So that's when the year before that is when I set up Triscape, our kind of coaching business with my husband David. So I knew I had something to step into, and I was excited about that. And also, I knew I was making the right decision, because about 3 months before the Olympic Games, I was driving to training one morning, and I just thought, oh, I can't wait to not have to do this again. And I was like, whoa, I have never said that in my whole life. I cannot believe I've just said that. Like, it came out of my mouth. It wasn't a thought I had. It came out of my mouth, and I was like, ah, no, get your head back in the game. I'm not done yet. I need to carry on and get back into the swing of things. So that was an interesting point, was being able to just knowing that that was definitely the right thing to do. And if I'm completely honest, I do not miss getting up at 5 a.m. I do not miss being the first in the water. I do not miss doing 7K every session, and I do not miss being the last out of the water, and I do not miss having to do that again and again and again and again. Yeah, I really don't miss that at all. And I don't miss competing. Again, competing for me wasn't about winning. It was about proving how good I was as an athlete. It was about proving how, you know, if the training I was doing was working. That's what racing was. You know, was I getting better? Was I getting faster? Was I getting quicker? But that was for me. It wasn't for anybody else. It was to win a medal. It was literally, it was all for me. So it really, like that, I do not miss that at all. What I do miss, and I miss it so much, are the relationships. It's the friendships that you have, and you see your coach every single day for literally years, and then all of a sudden you literally don't see her. Like, I didn't see my coach Laurel pretty much again for like 5 months after I retired from swimming. And it's the friends that you don't see again on the way. So things like you, I definitely felt like I mourned when you stopped swimming, and I had to, you know, go on to all these competitions, which was a real privilege to go on these competitions, but I had to go on my own. Or you know, they're just, yeah, you just miss certain people and certain pockets of your life and different scenarios that you really feel really comfortable in, and then all of a sudden they're taken away because we've taken them away. But yeah, that was, for me, that's the hardest part of it all, was really missing that stuff.
Cool. Did you ever have long periods away from the pool, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I took a year out from racing. I still trained 4 days a week, which felt like literally nothing, for a year. So after the London Olympics, I wasn't sure if I wanted to carry on swimming or not. You know, coming fourth at home Olympics by 0.4 of a second, kind of a hard pill to swallow. But I made the choice probably like 4 months into that I was going to work on being a better, more well-rounded open water swimmer. And what it meant was I did a lot of traveling. So I traveled around the world, racing different competitions, doing things like swimming, you know, swimming with boys to try and basically figure out how to deal with swimming in a pack and fighting and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that I wasn't very good at doing, or I didn't want to do, or avoided at all costs, is essentially what I did. I did a little bit more learning for me as well. So even though we hadn't set up Triscape, I was trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do when I finished swimming. So it was, you know, I did a journalism course, like a home learning course, which was actually really fun to do something a bit different. I didn't know if I wanted to get into that, but I thought this is a good way of figuring that out. Now is a very different time, because it's not like it's your choice to stop, but it's, and you really don't exactly know how long it's going to be. But what I would say to all the swimmers at the moment who are finding it tricky to be out of the water for a long time is use this as an opportunity to figure out what it is that you want to do when you finish swimming. You don't have, you know, the worry now of what your coach is going to say, or if you can do some research into it, do some research. If it's a course that you can do, online, which most of them are now, it's worth doing that. If it's doing a social media course, if it's doing a photography course, all the kind of stuff, you can do all of that now and use this time to do that, and you can still do the exercise that you need to do. So I'd say that's what I really made the most of the year I took out, was learning all the things I could. I had the privilege of being able to travel the world to do that. And we don't necessarily have that choice right now, but like I said, I did a journalism course during that time as well, just so that I could figure out if it's something that I wanted to do.
Excellent. That's all our questions, but me and Kez were chatting before, and I think that it'd be worth just hearing a quick snippet of what Selkie, the open water brand that you're with, what they do, because I think it was quite cool.
Yeah, so Selkie are they're like a lifestyle brand, essentially, an open water, more open water specific. So they do some swimsuits, which are quite nice swimsuits. The really exciting thing about the swimsuits, though, is that they're made from recycled fishing nets. So fishing nets, they get lost in the ocean. There's a team of amazing people that go down for free as a charity. They go down, they pick them all up, and what the nets do is they're killing our wildlife. They trap things in them. They trap all sorts of stuff in there, and they get stuck on coral as well, and they kill the coral, which is all really, really bad stuff. So these guys are doing amazing things, and they take the nets back up and they turn it into nylon, and they can make swimsuits out of it, and they make leggings. I think their new stuff will have some leggings in it as well that are made out of these recycled nets and stuff, and carpets, all that kind of stuff. So I was really excited to listen to them, to hear what they had to say, and then on top of all the swimming stuff that they do, they also do some lifestyle wear. So hoodies, they have a really nice thing, it's called a Sherpa hoodie, which is fleece lined on the inside, nice and furry on the inside, all the way down to the arms. So if you're doing any open water swimming and you get a little bit chilly, you can stick that on as soon as you get out of the water, and keep yourself nice and cozy.
That's great, Keri Ann. Thank you very much for coming on and having a chat. Look after yourself during this period, and you and your family.
You too, and I hope that everybody is keeping themselves busy at the moment and not worrying about what they can't control. So don't worry about the things that you can't control. You can't control when you go back to swimming, so don't worry about it. Just do what you can to make yourself a better person when you do come out of it.